Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Welcome back to the Women's Lounge. I'm your host, Emiliana Guareca. It's Friday, and you know what time it is. This is the space where we talk feminism, politics, culture, and yes, enjoy each other's company in the Women's Lounge. Because women's lives are complicated, glorious, and messy, and every issue is a woman's issue, today we're diving into some heavy topics, important stories. We're talking about abortion rights under attack again and continuously. We're talking about Kamala Harris's Secret Service drama, um, another tragic school shooting just as we are headed back to school, and the rise of the conservative trad wives. And don't worry, I've saved a little bit of space at the end for Taylor Swift's engagement and Cardi B's courtroom drama. Someone called it mama drama, but it's Cardi B's courtroom moment. Balancing is key. So we're going to talk about the important issues that are happening this week in the Women's Lounge. So we're going to start today with the Women's Rights Watch. As you know, we usually host Women's Rights Watch at the end of the segment, but today we're hosting it at the beginning of the segment because it is serious what is happening on the ground. So this week, the 19th News reported that anti-abortion groups are rolling out a pretty very insidious legal strategy. They are filing wrongful death lawsuits that claim that telehealth abortions are coercive. They are trying to flip the script and trying to change the language around reproductive choice. They are arguing that women are somehow victims just for seeking abortion care online. They're trying to dismantle the telehealth care currently available. But what's really going on is that telehealth has been a lifeline for a lot of women across the United States since the fall of Roe in 2022, but especially for rural women, low-income women, people without easy access to clinics. So these lawsuits are meant to scare providers and patients out of using telehealth altogether. So we're going to keep an eye on that. For example, there's this one man who claims that his girlfriend was coerced into taking the abortion pill from a telehealth company. So that's we're going to keep watching that. But the good news is that in states like California, New York, Massachusetts, they passed what is called SHIELD laws, and these SHIELD laws protect doctors who prescribe abortion medication via telehealth across state lines. So we've got a little bit of reprieve there, so hoping that continues to stand. But if you live in Texas and your doctor's in California, that California provider can't be sued or prosecuted under Texas law. So that's what that means. But you know that the anti-abortion forces and their coalition, they'll test every loophole and try to find what sticks. So we're going to hold firm. And what that means for us, it means that the fight for reproductive justice, reproductive freedom is not just about the federal ban. We knew that it would come down to the states, and we knew they would need it to fight state by state. So what we know is that they are now coming at telehealth. And so what we're talking about is honestly death by 1,000 paper cuts. This is what they're trying to do. They're trying to control women, coerce them, and really chip away at every right we have. So they're trying to criminalize telehealth. They're trying to criminalize mail order birth control next, which is where we think they're headed. And that's why staying active, but also staying informed matters, staying vigilant matters, organizing matters, because as we know, they are not done with dismantling reproductive rights. And we know that reproductive justice has to be the front line for women. If we don't have bodily autonomy, what do we have? So we're going to continue to watch that. Let that sink in. We are still fighting the fight for autonomy, bodily autonomy. But we'll continue. We're tough. We're built for this. So we're going to jump into the Secret Service politics. We're talking about President Trump and the administration versus Kamala Harris. Realistically, that's what it is. Trump versus Harris. So it's all politics. The president has revoked the extended Secret Service protection for VP Kamala Harris. Normally, vice presidents get about 6 months of protection after leaving office. President Biden extended Harris's coverage for a year as she continuously received threats, and we think she continues to receive threats, but Trump said, nope, gone. Her Secret Service detail is gone. So what does it tell us? It tells us that it's about power. His retribution, that's what we're calling it. The retribution term is about pettiness. He's being petty. Honestly, he's really trying to send a message about who should be in leadership and dismantling anything that has to do with women in leadership. So we're talking about the first Black South Asian woman, daughter of immigrants, to serve as a vice president. And we now think that security for her is optional. So for big picture for women in politics, just so everyone knows, women in politics are already targeted at higher rates. Remember what happened to Gretchen Whitmer. Remember what happened to Nancy Pelosi's husband. They were really looking for Nancy Pelosi, but women are targeted at higher rates. They are targeted higher threats for harassment, stalking. So decision by the Trump administration to cut away Kamala Harris's security reinforces the idea that women's safety is negotiable, and it's dangerous, not just for Harris, but for every woman that's thinking about stepping into public office. You've got to think about your safety, right? And so this really signifies shift on what the past presidents have done, but we're not dealing with a normal president. So, and this, to be fair, this comes right as she is about to engage or launch her book tour. So we'll see where that leads us. I don't think Harris was expecting the pull of security, but I also don't think that she was expecting any kind of civility from him. So I think she's going to be fine. I think she's going to be fine. But for women considering running into office, it gives us a pause. How safe are we going to be? And what do we need to do to make sure that we are safe? All right. So speaking of safety, I'm going to take a deep breath. So we're talking about back to school week and the Minneapolis school shooting. It was, talk about heartbreaking news. School shooting in Minneapolis at the Annunciation Catholic School during morning mass. So a former student, a 23-year-old, walked in and opened fire. 2 children were killed, an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old. I'm not going to mention their names because their family deserves respect. 18 others were injured, and though thankfully most are expected to survive, the shooter, a young man, died by suicide, leaving behind a manifesto filled with anti-Semitic and anti-Catholic rhetoric and disturbing obsessions with mass killings. Authorities are treating it as a possible domestic terrorism. The hard truth is that it wasn't random, and this is becoming so normal for our kids in schools, and we are tasking our kids with being vigilant at schools and feeling unsafe at schools. We're also tasking teachers, which is a profession that is really, really filled by women. The majority of teachers are women. So it's hard. It's hard to think that we are still here, that we are not talking about common sense gun laws. The shooter wrote about hating almost every group imaginable, filled with bigotry, violent ideology. I mean, we're looking at it again on the political side, where Republicans are seizing the tragedy to attack Minnesota's transgender protections, to attack healthcare, instead of focusing on the real issue, which is the common sense gun laws. And to be fair, it should not be a Democrat or Republican side. We are talking about children's lives at stake. We are talking about children feeling unsafe at school. And so we need to talk about having empathy and there are families grieving their children. And so I think we should be empathetic to helping support the mental health and well-being of those families, those communities. The Catholic church that they attended needs to be supported with empathy, with care, with love, instead of political ideology and political things. At the current moment, thoughts and prayers seem to be not enough, but honestly, I want to talk about sending them love and sending them strength. So I think we need to have empathy and really talk about how the country deals with gun access, how the country gives access to mental health, and how hopefully we are helping that community come together, heal, and figure out next steps forward. Because this is a tragedy, not just for that community, but for students across the country. So as women, as mothers, as community leaders, we refuse to accept that this is normal. We don't want to accept that this is normal. We want to figure out a way forward with positivity and giving space for the community and families to heal. So it's emotional. It's back to school week, and we started with the tragedy. So hoping that we all come together to help this community move forward, and taking a deep breath to make sure that we meet people where they are. It's not time for political rhetoric. It's not time for Republicans versus Democrats. It is time for community. So that being said, I am going to move it into a lighter note and shifting gears, maybe just a bit from the cruelty, but shifting gears into the womenosphere. I don't even know how to pronounce it. So Katie Miller has released a podcast, and if for those that don't know, Katie Miller is Stephen Miller's wife. Katie Miller was a former Trump aide. When we say Stephen Miller's wife, we know we're talking about the man from California who works for the Trump administration, who is behind the intense deportation and cruelty behind the deportation actions currently in California and across the country. So Stephen Miller's wife, Katie Miller, launched a podcast. She's pitching it as a lifestyle and politics for conservative women. So Vox calls it part of the womenosphere, and correct me if I'm wrong. But it's an entire influencer world where conservative women blend homemaking tips, family values, and politics into one glossy Instagram feed. But here's the thing. These spaces are powerful. These spaces are open to women, but they don't look political, but they are. They are political. They look like cooking tips and motherhood advice, but underneath they're pushing a specific ideology. They're pushing that women belong at home, that women should be led by men. Yes, that men should lead, that feminism ruins everything. They are pushing an ideology that being a feminist is wrong. So if it sounds familiar, it's not new. Katie Miller's show is strategic, as it is a reminder that it is a fight for feminist media. We're not just competing against the right-wing politicians. We're competing with Pinterest boards and podcasts that tell women that they are only worthy in servitude, that they are only worthy if they are mothers, that they are only worthy if men are leading them. So I do want to say that it's insidious the way it's been done. And for context, an analysis of the 2024 election widely spoke about I call it brosphere, but it is the manosphere. It's a coalition of bro podcasters and YouTubers popular with young men, popular with male audiences. So they were a key to delivering Donald Trump's victory. So according to an Associated Press poll, 56% of men under the age of 30 voted for Trump, compared with 41% the years prior. So by meeting young men where they were at, Trump and his surrogates were able to reach voters who were typically among the least politically engaged. And so they started to engage these folks at the beginning in these segments of society in an organized effort to create an ecosystem, an echo chamber for them. So just like that, this is what they were trying to create with the anti-feminist media. So the right-wing media ecosystem targets young female U.S. audiences. So one of the few demographics that has until now leaned substantially democratic, lean towards standing for reproductive rights. So now they are trying to even it out with what they're calling the women's sphere. Katie Miller, Candace Owens, and there's a lot of them out there that are trying to delegitimize feminism. And really, feminism is for everyone, because you can't talk to me about being a traditional wife and then launching a whole brand and launching a whole podcast, because that's anti what you currently tell me you stand for. So we're going to leave that at that. With that, we're going to move into the Trad Wife memoir from Lauren Southern. So speaking of Lauren Southern's memoir, it's back in the headlines. So she is reflecting on her time as a self-proclaimed trad wife, traditional wife. So the trad wife image, as we talked about previously, is about baking pie, staying sweet, submitting to your husband, getting dressed up as empowerment. Deep breath. Let's talk about what it really is. It's really about patriarchy repackaged and going back to the 90s. No one was really doing that. It was part of the marketing to continue to keep women home and romanticize inequality. That's what it is. We're romanticizing inequality, that we look like tens, where our waist is this thin, and we're super happy looking fabulous while we carry our kids. And we know that motherhood, life is messy. No one looks like that 24/7. So, to be fair, personal choice matters. If a woman chooses to stay at home, that's her right. That's her right. And that's what feminism is. It's that it's your choice. When an entire political movement glamorizes the domestic servitude as the only moral path for women, then that's no longer a choice. It's no longer a choice. It's coercion. And I've talked about this previously on the traditional wife. It's also a socioeconomic flex. When you look at the traditional wife, you are looking usually at a white woman with a professional husband and a brood of about 4 to 6 kids, and they always look fabulous. What we don't see in the background is that none of that is easy and none of that is cheap. It is expensive. So we're also talking about a socioeconomic level and a socioeconomic photo of who gets to have families and enjoy their families, but we don't see what it costs to have a family. We don't see the coercion of this, and we also don't see what is called the financial abuse, right? So does the woman have all of the resources she needs to live her life to the fullest, or is she just tasked with household and the kids? So stay tuned. We're going to continue to talk about that. And yes, I'm a mother. I'm a mother of 2 kids. I work. I'm messy. I'm a feminist, but that's the point. It's a choice. I choose to do that. All right. So we're moving into the immigration update, as we've talked about the plight of immigrant women. And right now, what I want to talk about is their children. Moving into talking about the immigrant children, according to CNN, migrant children are being deported to Guatemala this week. Kids separated from families are being put on planes and they're being sent back to Guatemala, which means there is no due process, which means that they had no attorney. They probably didn't have a court case. So these kids are being used as bargaining chips in the political fights that are currently happening. It's cruel. It's unnecessary. But once again, it will be women, especially mothers, that will be in the front lines of this pain. I just recently read a study on how much trauma we are inflicting on immigrant women whether they are legal or undocumented, the trauma is real for women. When it comes to family separation, it's a women's rights issue. It's a human's rights issue. So immigrant women's rights are under attack. When we talk about that, we're talking about trauma that is being inflicted on the children, on the women, because the systems are failing. The system has failed when we don't have immigration reform. The system has failed when we are not following due process. Regardless of whether you're documented or undocumented, the United States has had a due process. That is the right of everyone. So right now they are deporting kids. Guatemala has agreed to receive them. So that is what we're dealing with. And we'll keep an eye because there are over 600 children, according to CNN, that will be shipped off to Guatemala. Then these are children that they are stating they don't have family in the United States or don't have a caregiver in the United States. So that is what is happening. I'm going to close it with something lighter, but still powerful, powerful stories. So first up, yes, I'm a Swiftie. So Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce are officially engaged, and I'm happy to announce that they got engaged on Women's Equality Day, the 26th of August. So Swifties are screaming. Yes. NFL fans are secretly thrilled, and not secretly, I think they're thrilled. So I also think that Kansas City may have just become the wedding capital of America, but let's see. So Taylor Swift, as we know, has built an empire on being unapologetic, being herself, being authentic. And now she's pairing it with one of the biggest football stars. So it's a culture shifting power move. I don't know if they're going to call it a power couple, but I do see them as separate. So we'll see. So it's music, sports, fandom colliding. Super excited for that. So now I'm going to move into Cardi B. She was in court this week in Los Angeles and it was drama. So Cardi B is facing charges in a long-running standing case, and she's being sued for what is millions and millions of dollars. But she walked into the courtroom. She owned the courtroom like it was a runway. One day blonde hair, the next day brunette. Yes. And I'm not sure where they got this attorney, but the questions he was asking were so out of pocket. But this is what I love about Cardi B. She handled that. She brought humor, honesty, and chaos. The stakes are high for her. She is being sued for millions. But what we really saw was the double standard on what is expected of a female artist, both from her staff and from the attorney and from her being in court. People called her unprofessional, but she was loud, she was bold, she was unfiltered, she was Cardi B. So there. So I think she was brilliant. She's living proof that when focused, women can do whatever they want, regardless of what people think about you. So yes, Taylor Swift is engaged. Cardi's B courtrooms drama. We'll see what happens. Hopefully she wins that case. But both stories and all the stories, honestly, remind us that women need to continue taking up space, that in whatever way possible, we need to make sure that we are taking up space. We need to make sure that we are continuing to stay loud, to stay bold. Everything is political. I know people say that it's not, but everything's about policy, so it's political. So that's our Friday Women's Lounge session, from abortion rights to school shootings to conservative podcasters. Thank you for joining me today. Thank you for centering women in every story. Thank you for hanging out with me. Don't forget to subscribe, share with your friends. And coming up next week, we're going to continue staying loud. We're going to continue with looking at the immigrants' rights plight. We're going to continue to look at abortion rights. And definitely get some tickets to Kamala Harris's book signing tour. So stay loud, stay bold, and remember, every issue is a woman's issue. Thank you for joining me.